deep beneath the sweltering heat of modern Cairo, inside the basement storage facility of the Cairo Museum, there rests an object that most of the world has been conditioned to believe does not exist. While the public queues for hours to see the golden burial masks and the ornate jewelry of the dynastic pharaohs, there is a limestone block gathering dust in the dark, catalogued under the dry, uninspiring designation of JE 9289. This is not just a piece of rock. It is a critical piece of forensic evidence that has been effectively erased from history. It measures roughly 1.2 meters, and it is etched with a hieroglyphic register that defies every rule of the standard Egyptian religious canon. The last time this stone was officially processed, a visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago, a woman with 2 decades of elite field experience, photographed a section of the carving and wrote a frantic note in her field diary. The beings depicted were fundamentally non-human and had no analog in any known text. That was in 1973. Shortly after her report, the block was moved to permanent, restricted storage. It hasn't seen the light of day since. We aren't talking about a legend or a myth. We are talking about a physical artifact excavated in 1971 from a sealed subsidiary chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis. This site, the home of the world's oldest monumental stone architecture, was being excavated by the legendary Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer. Lauer spent 70 years at Saqqara. He wasn't a fringe theorist. He was the gold standard of Egyptology. His field notes, which sit right now in the French National Center for Scientific Research in Paris, explicitly state that the chamber he found predated the surrounding step pyramid complex by centuries. Stratigraphically, it shouldn't have been there. It is a structure from a time that history says was devoid of such architectural capability. The museum officially categorized it as pre-dynastic ceremonial relief, provenance uncertain, and then simply locked the file. The beings on the block are labeled with a specific compound hieroglyphic glyph. Egyptologists have translated this provisionally as those who came before the counting of years. In the strict, bureaucratic language of the ancient scribes, this isn't poetry, it's an administrative filing. They were naming a class of beings, a specific office, or a type of existence that was so distinct it required a new, custom glyph that appears nowhere else in the royal records. The Egyptians weren't writing fantasies, they were maintaining an archive of a biological reality. They inherited a reality that we are now being prevented from investigating. If the limestone block in Cairo were an isolated anomaly, we could perhaps dismiss it as a mistake, a rare example of an ancient artist having a strange vision. But history has a way of repeating itself, and the truth has a way of resurfacing, even across 2,000 kilometers of rugged terrain and 7,000 years of silence. In the year 2000, German archaeologist Dr. Klaus Schmidt published a field report regarding his work at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. At the time, the world was already in shock. This site was the oldest ritual complex on Earth, far older than the pyramids, older than the invention of writing itself. Among the carved limestone pillars, Schmidt documented Pillar 43, which the academic community now calls the vulture stone because of its intricate carvings. During his work, Schmidt logged a recurring abstract element, a forked rod held at a downward angle by a headless figure. He classified it as a cultic implement and moved on because in his framework there was no reason to connect a headless figure in Turkey to a block in a basement in Egypt. There is no evidence in any academic paper or interview that Schmidt was ever aware of the artifact labeled JE 9289. He wasn't looking for a connection. He didn't even know the Cairo artifact existed. Yet, he found a perfect parallel. The same forked rod, the same configuration. We are looking at two separate civilizations operating in two completely different environments, separated by an unimaginable amount of time, yet sharing the exact same iconography. This isn't just about art. It's about the transmission of a specific technical concept. When two cultures build the same symbol, the skeptics scream parallel evolution. They claim that humans just have the same ideas, but parallel evolution doesn't account for the specificity of the instrument. This wasn't a sword or a staff or a simple tool. It was a forked, angled device, depicted in a way that suggests a functional, mechanical use, a tool for construction, not a symbol for a god. The fact that the same instrument appears in both the oldest site in Turkey and a hidden chamber in Egypt is a smoking gun that mainstream history has spent decades trying to ignore. It suggests that there was an original source, a template that influenced both sites, a template that predates the dawn of civilization as we know it. The most damning evidence isn't the shape of the tool, it's the math. In 2017, Dr. Robert Schoch, a Yale-educated geologist who has spent 30 years challenging the status quo of ancient history, presented a paper to the Geological Society of America. His presentation wasn't about aliens or mystery, it was about hard geological data and architectural analysis. When he analyzed the carvings on Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe, he noticed something the other researchers had completely missed. The forked implements, these ritual objects, weren't just drawn randomly. They were rendered at a precise, consistent downward angle of 33 degrees from horizontal. This is a level of geometric precision that should not exist in the Neolithic period. An ancient carver doesn't accidentally hit a perfect 33-degree angle on multiple carvings unless they are following a set of engineering standards. Schoch noted this as architecturally significant, but he didn't realize at the time that he was holding the key to a much larger mystery. When independent researchers took geometric findings and compared them to the photographs of the Cairo Museum's block JE9289, the results were chilling. The forked implements carved into the Egyptian stone appear at the exact same 33-degree angle. This is not a coincidence. You don't have parallel evolution of a 33-degree measurement across 7,000 years. If a modern company uses a specific measurement for a part, and that part shows up in two different factories in two different countries without any communication, you assume they are using the same blueprint. That is exactly what we are seeing here. We are seeing a 33-degree fingerprint left by a builder who possessed a standard of measurement that survived through the millennia. This angle is the evidence that the beings described on the Egyptian stone and the builders of the Turkish pillars were operating from the same manual. It suggests that there was a highly advanced population that provided the technical specification for these sites, specifications that were preserved by the ancient peoples who worked under them. The mainstream will tell you this is just artistic convention, but you cannot artistically arrive at a 33-degree angle twice across 7 millennia. This is the mark of a transmitted technology. Now we enter the realm of genetics, and this is where the question stops being about stone and starts being about our actual biologic makeup. In 2019, a major team led by Dr. S.K. Villerslev at the University of Copenhagen published a landmark study in the journal Nature Communications. They analyzed the DNA of 166 individuals from pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian burials. The headlines were all about the migration patterns of ancient populations, confirming what we already knew about the Levant and North Africa. It was a standard, dry scientific paper, but if you dig into the supplementary material, the data tables that nobody reads, you find something that the authors themselves tried to bury. Table 7. In this table, there are 4 specific individuals from a pre-dynastic layer at Saqqara, the same site where the carved block was found, who carry a Y chromosome haplogroup variant that doesn't belong on the human family tree. The researchers actually noted it in a single line, calling it a low-confidence call or a possible sequencing artifact. They didn't do a follow-up, They didn't write a second paper. They didn't investigate why 4 people in the same burial layer had genetic markers that our science cannot explain. They just left them as unresolved in the dataset. Think about the implications. These aren't just random graves. These are the burials directly beneath the chamber where Lauer's team found the block depicting those who came before. We have a genetic anomaly appearing in the exact place where history tells us there should only be standard human remains. The mainstream will tell you this is noise, that ancient DNA from hot, dry climates is degraded and produces bad data. But 4 individuals with a coherent, organized haplogroup variant, that isn't noise. That is a signal. It's a biological record of a group of people who were genetically distinct from the surrounding population, living in the same vicinity as the builders of these impossible structures. The official science has reached the threshold of the truth, looked at it, and decided it was easier to label it a sequencing error than to rewrite the history of our species. It is important to be fair to the establishment. If you talk to a working archaeologist or a genomic researcher, they will give you a very logical, very clean set of counter-arguments. They will tell you that humans are resourceful, that parallel development is a reality of history, and that artistic conventions can easily look like technical standards to a modern observer. They will argue that the forked rod is just a common tool, that the 33-degree angle is just a quirk of the carving surface, and that the genomic anomaly in Table S7 is nothing more than the degradation of DNA in the Egyptian heat. They are the reasonable positions. They are the positions that get you published in the big journals, that get you funding, and that keep you in the good graces of the academic community. And in isolation, these arguments work. If you only look at the tool, maybe it's a coincidence. If you only look at the angle, maybe it's an error. If you only look at the DNA, maybe it's contamination. But the problem with the mainstream position is that it refuses to look at the convergence of the data. It assumes that these are all isolated, unrelated failures of analysis. But they aren't isolated. They are converging on the same physical point in time and space. The archaeological record doesn't lie, and the math doesn't lie. You cannot explain away the convergence of the geometric tool, the ancient carving, and the anomalous DNA as a string of coincidences. If you flip a coin and it comes up heads, that's chance. If it comes up heads 50 times in a row, you are looking at a rigged game. Mainstream academia is trying to convince you that the coin is flipping heads by accident every single time. They don't have an explanation for the 33-degree angle across 2 continents. They don't have an explanation for the consistent compound glyphs. They don't have an explanation for the biological markers that don't fit the human tree. Their silence isn't a lack of evidence, it's a defensive posture.